So an A-10 conducted a self-defense strike near MSS Euphrates when some individuals were establishing a rocket rail. The A-10s went in, took it out, period, dot. Self-defense, not in support of any kind of, operations by any other groups that are going on. This is defending our forces. That simple.
But I was asking since then.
No. On Tuesday, I highlighted U.S. self-defense strikes in the vicinity of MSS Euphrates in Syria when U.S. forces faced an imminent danger due to several threats to include rockets and mortars fired in the direction of U.S. forces in the area. U.S. Central Command has advised that 3 U.S. service members are being evaluated for possible TBI. As you know, those numbers can fluctuate, and I'm not aware of any other injuries at this time.
You mentioned the 3 service members being evaluated for TBIs. Who is responsible for that attack? Who did the U.S. military target on Tuesday?
Yeah, again, as I highlighted on Tuesday, that's something that we're still assessing. It's, again, important to highlight that region has been so first of all, we know that Iranian-backed militia groups operate in that area. We also know that Syrian regime forces operate in that area. But this location has been used in the past by groups like Iranian-backed militias to target U.S. forces at MSS Euphrates. But again, in terms of who is operating those vehicles or who is firing those rockets and mortars, that is something that, as I understand it, CENTCOM is still assessing.
True, but you did mention a T-64 tank last time. Isn't that normally something that's used by the Syrians or the Russians, not Iranian militia groups?
Entirely possible, Carl. Again, as I just highlighted, we do know that there are Syrian regime forces in that area, but in terms of at that moment and who is doing what, that's something that, again, as I understand it, CENTCOM is still looking at. So, Fadi.
Thank you, General. So concerning those 3 U.S. soldiers who are being evaluated for the potential TBI, where were they when that impact happened, what raised the concern of potential?
Yeah, again, this is all, in the vicinity of MSS Euphrates in that region down there.
Inside the wire or outside the wire?
That's as detailed as I'm going to get.
On Tuesday, I asked you whether the U.S. Provided support for SDF forces attack on the 7 villages where the SAA is located. They have positions there, and you referred me to the SDF. I'm asking you as a spokesperson for the Pentagon, did your forces provide any support for the SDF in that operation?
Look, our forces are in Syria to conduct a counter-ISIS operation, right? The enduring defeat of ISIS. They have partnered with the SDF on those missions. Certainly, they communicate with the SDF on a frequent basis, as partners do. But our forces in that region were threatened. We took action to mitigate that threat, and we'll do so again. And so, again, they're communicating with one another. We're aware of what the SDF is doing. I'm not going to talk about SDF operations. I'll let them talk about their operations. But let me just be crystal clear. Our forces are in Syria to conduct the enduring defeat of ISIS mission. We're doing that in partnership with the SDF, and I'm just going to leave it there.
With all due respect, General, I'm not asking about SDF operations. I'm asking about your operations. Did the U.S. forces provide support for SDF offensive on SAA positions in those 7 villages east of
If you're
Euphrates?
asking were U.S. forces, participating in combined arms maneuver with the SDF, the answer is no.
No,
all right.
That's not my question.
Okay.
Did you provide
I've answered the question.
So
our forces are in Syria.
I'm not getting a
okay.
yes or no from you. For transparency, no, that's no, right?
John, what do you got?
Thank you.
Thank you, General. About Syria, after Aleppo, it looks like the opposition forces are moving southward toward other important cities in Syria, like Homs and Hama. And is your position is changing because the thing is evaluating to something or evolving to something bigger, it seems? Do you have any communication at this phase with the opposition forces or through your Turkish allies on the developments in Syria?
We're certainly monitoring the situation closely. Again, the U.S. has no role in what's happening right now in terms of northwestern Syria and the HTS and their operations and the Syrian regime. Again, as you know, the Syrian civil war has been going on for a while. This is a new development in that war. But again, we're monitoring closely, very aware of the destabilizing effect. As we've said earlier, we call on all parties to de-escalate. to ensure the protection of minorities groups in the region. We don't want to see more death and destruction in that regard. But again, we're no involvement by the U.S. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. On Syria, an SDF spokesperson said that ISIS is claiming to have control over significant portions of the Homs and Deir ez-Zor regions. Does that match your assessment? Is ISIS gaining ground? And can you give us any update on the success that American counterterror forces are having or not having in the area?
To my knowledge, I'm not aware of ISIS taking any type of, taking significant territory. We do know that ISIS does maintain a capability for obvious reasons, which is why we're there. We do see them continuing to plan and conduct attacks, which again is why we're there, working with the SDF, which is also supporting counter ISIS operations. So it's a threat we obviously have to take seriously. Because what we don't want to see is a resurgence, back to what we saw a decade ago. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you, General. Have you, have your colleagues have any more deconfliction conversations with the Russians in Syria?
I don't have anything to read out on that front. Yeah.
Okay, but then a few days ago you said that an A-10 had been used in close combat or at least close protection. That came out a few days later. Do we have any more information about an A-10 being used in the ground operations that are being conducted by the SDF?
So I answered this question on Tuesday, which is why I'm looking confused. So an A-10 conducted a self-defense strike near MSS Euphrates when some individuals were establishing a rocket rail. The A-10s went in, took it out, period, dot. Self-defense, not in support of any kind of, operations by any other groups that are going on. This is defending our forces.
Right.
That simple.
But I was asking since then.
No.
In the Middle East, one Syria, one Lebanon. What steps has the U.S. military taken in Syria in light of the security situation and to prepare for what looks like the possible collapse of the Assad regime?
So I'm not going to speculate about the future of the Assad regime. And again, our forces are in Syria to support the enduring defeat of ISIS. We're obviously going to take appropriate measures to ensure that those forces are protected. But and as it relates to the ongoing Syrian civil war and what you see in terms of the various groups fighting one another, that's something that we're going to continue to monitor. As we've highlighted, we would call on all parties to de-escalate. But from a U.S. military standpoint, our focus continues to be on the defeat ISIS mission.
And then can you update us on the effort of General Jasper Jeffers as part of the ceasefire monitoring mechanism? Has that advanced to a point where it is fully functioning, or what can you say to that?
I don't have any more detailed updates to provide from what I gave out on Tuesday. General Jeffers is in Beirut working out of the embassy. But again, we'll keep you updated as we have new information to provide. Let me go back to Wafa. Yep.
Thank you, General. In light of the quick advances the opposition in Syria is making, if you can explain a little bit how the Pentagon will address the new circumstances on the ground in Syria. Is the Pentagon ready to engage with elements of this opposition? And also, are these circumstances will have impact on the U.S. forces posture in Syria?
So let me make sure, just to clarify, are you asking, will the U.S. reach out to HTS?
Elements of this opposition?
No. It is a terrorist group, so no plans to do that. And again, as I mentioned, the U.S. has nothing to do with that offensive. And as far as it relates to U.S. personnel in Syria, I'll say it again: the whole reason our forces are there and have been there is to support the enduring defeat of ISIS mission. We'll continue to work with partners like the SDF toward that end. That is our mission. So,
do you have any concerns that this situation in Syria can spill out into Iraq?
Well, that's what you saw 10 years ago, right? As essentially the security vacuum that was created by the repressive measures of the Assad regime instigated the rise of ISIS, which did spill over into Iraq, which is why U.S. forces have been working very closely with an international coalition for a decade now to prevent the resurgence of ISIS so that that can be contained. Again, as it relates to what's going on in northwestern Syria, we're obviously all watching. We want to see a de-escalation. We understand the potential ramifications regionally, but right now, from a U.S. military standpoint, our focus continues to be on preventing an ISIS resurgence.
There are some reports about Russia withdrawing naval assets from Syria. Do you have anything on this?
I don't. I'd have to refer you to the Russian MOD. Let me go to the phone real quick. Jeff Shogel, Task and Purpose.
Hi. I know this has been that when the U.S. troops on Tuesday were attacked, they were supporting a militia, possibly part of the SDF, that was fighting the Assad regime. And I was just wondering if there's any information about this. I know you may say, Jeff, you need to talk to the Assad regime, but I think they're looking at flight tickets and hotels at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Very similar question to what your colleague Fadi just asked. And so I'll try again. So we have U.S. forces that are operating at MSS Euphrates. They're obviously in partnership with the SDF when it comes to the enduring defeat of ISIS mission. We do communicate with the SDF. We are aware in many cases of their operations to ensure that our forces know who's doing what. In this particular case, I'm not going to talk about SDF operations. I'm not an SDF spokesperson, and so I'm just not going to do that. U.S. forces are in that region. Are they communicating with the SDF? Of course. Were U.S. forces threatened when the elements that I highlighted earlier started threatening our forces? We took appropriate action to mitigate that threat, protect our forces. Again, our mission in Syria has not changed. It's the enduring defeat of ISIS. And again, I'll leave it there. Let me go to Jeff, Defense News.